Christmas morning felt ordinary in the best way. The house smelled like coffee and pine needles, and the old radiator in the hallway kept clicking like it always did when the heat kicked on. I'd already wiped down the kitchen counters twice, more out of habit than necessity, while the cinnamon rolls warmed in the oven. My son, Evan, had driven in late the night before with his wife Tara and the kids. Evan is 36 now, Tara's a little younger. They'd brought their usual overnight bags, and the children's coats were piled in a loose heap by the front door like a small snowdrift. After breakfast, we opened a few gifts in the living room. Nothing fancy. The kids tore through wrapping paper while Evan tried to keep the tape from sticking to his sweater. Tara kept her phone close in her hand, taking pictures, checking messages, smiling when it was expected. It was calm, almost peaceful. Around noon, Evan offered to help me carry a few boxes down to the basement, decorations, extra folding chairs, things I'd stored the week before. I told him he didn't have to, but he insisted. So we did it together, step by careful step, the wooden stairs creaking under our weight. When we came back up, Tara was in the dining room putting plates into neat stacks. She did it like she was arranging something for display, not because it needed doing. I heard the soft clink of ceramic, the scrape of a chair moving across the floor. That's when Evan bumped my old briefcase off the sideboard. It wasn't dramatic, just an elbow at the wrong angle. The briefcase fell, the latch popped open, and a few papers slid out across the hardwood. Evan bent down to pick them up, but his hand stopped mid-reach. I saw his eyes catch on the top page, and the color in his face shift like someone had turned down the lights. "Dad," he said quietly, "is this real?" I moved faster than I meant to. I crouched and started gathering the papers, keeping them close to my chest like they were fragile. Tara had already stepped closer, not rushing, just interested. Her footsteps were light, but she was suddenly right there, looking over Evan's shoulder. Evan swallowed. "It says 14 million. He didn't say it loudly, he didn't need to. The room got very still anyway. I stood up and held the papers against my sweater. "Those are legal documents," I said, calm. "You don't need to worry about them." Tara's smile stayed in place, but something behind it sharpened. "Is that from your brother?" she asked, voice soft like she was checking on my feelings. "The one in Oregon?" I nodded once. "Mark passed a few months ago. The estate finally cleared." Evan sat down slowly at the dining table like his legs had decided for him. He stared at the wood grain as if it could tell him what to do next. Tara pulled out the chair beside him and sat with perfect posture. She folded her hands. Then she looked at me like we were beginning a conversation that had been waiting for years. "That's a lot of money," she said. "It is," I answered. Evan finally looked up. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't have anything to tell," I said. "Not until it was finalized." Tara nodded as if she understood. Then she tilted her head slightly. "I mean," she said, still gentle, "you're 68. You're comfortable. What would you even do with that kind of money?" I didn't respond right away. I walked to the kitchen, turned off the oven, and set the cinnamon rolls on the counter. The timer beeped once, then stopped. The quiet that followed felt heavier than it should have. When I came back, Evan's shoulders were tense. Tara's eyes tracked me the whole way. Evan cleared his throat. "Dad, Tara's not trying to be rude. It's just..." He glanced toward the framed photo of my grandkids on the mantel. "College is going to be expensive. Everything is expensive." Tara leaned forward, voice still smooth. "We've been trying so hard to stay afloat, and we're family." I set the papers down on the edge of the table, keeping my hand on them. "We can talk later," I said. Tara's smile thinned. "I think we should talk now." And then she said it, not loud, not dramatic, just clean and cold. "That money shouldn't be sitting with you. It should be with us." I looked at her for a moment, then at Evan. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just picked the papers back up, tucked them into the briefcase, and clicked the latch closed. A few minutes later, I went upstairs to put the briefcase in my bedroom closet. As I shut the door, my phone vibrated once in my pocket, an unknown number. No message yet. just the buzz, like a warning. I left the phone face down on the dresser. Then I went back downstairs and I let them keep talking as if I hadn't heard anything that mattered. Because by that point, I already knew one thing. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't going to stay a private family conversation for long. We ate dinner later than usual that night. The kids were worn out from sugar and running around, and Evan carried them upstairs one at a time while Tara brought out the leftover ham and green beans like she was hosting at her own place. The dining room light gave everything a warm glow, but the air felt thin, like the house had lost insulation. When the kids were finally in bed, Tara poured herself tea without asking. Evan took the chair across from me, elbows on the table, fingers laced. He looked tired in a way that wasn't about work, more like he'd been tired for years. Tara stirred honey into her cup slowly. No clinking, no mess, just control. "So," she said, "have you thought more about what we said earlier?" I didn't answer right away. I wiped my hands with a paper towel and folded it into a small square. I've always done that, even when I don't have a reason. Evan cleared his throat. "Dad, you know we wouldn't ask if we didn't need it." Tara kept her eyes on me. "It's not really asking," she said. "It's family. It's what family does when someone gets a windfall." I leaned back slightly. The chair creaked under me. "A windfall," I repeated. She nodded. "Yes, you didn't earn it. It's not like you built a business. It came to you because Mark didn't have anyone else." Evan shifted in his seat. He didn't disagree. He just watched my face, waiting to see if I'd get upset. I didn't. "I loved my brother," I said. "He made his choices. So did I." Tara's expression softened in a practiced way. "We love you too," she said, like it was the same kind of statement. Then she pointed lightly toward the living room where the kids' toys were still scattered. "But we're raising 2 children. You're alone here in this house. You're set. We're still building." Evan nodded as if the motion might keep him from falling apart. "We're behind on a few things," he added. "Just life, mortgage, the car, you know." I did know, because I'd been helping in quiet ways for a long time. Not with a big announcement, just with transfers, when Evan called in a low voice and said, "Can you spot us until Friday?" Or when Tara texted, "We're short on the electric bill, could you help?" And followed it with a heart emoji. Little things, repeated often enough to become a pattern. I'd told myself it was temporary. I told myself they'd stabilize. I told myself it was what my wife would have wanted. My wife, Lynn, had been gone 9 years now. Lung cancer. The kind that doesn't give you long to pretend you're in control. I still remembered the smell of that hospital room, cleaning solution and plastic, while the monitors kept their steady, indifferent rhythm. The last thing she asked me to do was look after Evan. She didn't ask me to protect him from consequences. She just asked me to look after him. I'd blurred those lines over time. Tara sipped her tea and watched me over the rim of the cup. "We're not saying you can't keep some," she said. "But you don't need all of it. It's excessive." Evan finally looked up. "If you helped us get ahead, we wouldn't have to keep stressing you out with these smaller requests." That was almost clever the way he phrased it. Like the problem was my inconvenience, not their dependence. I stared at the wood grain of the table and let the silence sit. Silence has always made people talk more than they intended. Tara set her cup down carefully. "You could pay off our mortgage, fund the kids' college, set up something for emergencies." She smiled. "It would feel good, wouldn't it?" I could hear the radiator ticking again. I could also hear Evan's knee bouncing under the table, a steady, nervous rhythm. "I'm not making decisions tonight," I said. Tara's smile held, but her eyes tightened. "Why not?" "Because it's Christmas," I answered. "And I'm tired." Evan's shoulders dropped like he was relieved I hadn't said no outright. Tara didn't look relieved. She looked like someone deciding whether to push harder or wait. Eventually, they went upstairs to the guest room. I stayed down a little longer, rinsing plates that were already clean, wiping counters that didn't need wiping. The house felt too quiet once the water stopped running. When I finally went to bed, I left my phone on the nightstand face down again. No new messages. Just that earlier buzz still sitting in my mind. At 11:30, I was still awake, staring up at the ceiling, and then I heard footsteps above me. Slow, measured, not the casual steps of someone getting ready for sleep, more like pacing. A few minutes later, I heard Tara's voice through the floorboards, low but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "He doesn't deserve that kind of money," she said. I didn't move. I just listened and let the dark do what it does, make people forget how loud they really are. Then Evan answered her, quieter but not quiet enough. And what he said back told me I was about to learn exactly how they saw me. I stayed still in bed. The house was old enough that sound traveled in straight lines, floorboards, air vents, the thin places you only notice when something matters. Tara's voice came again, steadier now. "He's wasted his whole life being careful. Same house, same routines, same boring job. And now he just gets $14 million? There was a pause. I could picture her standing, arms crossed, weighing the room like she owned it. Evan answered more quietly. "Lower your voice. He's asleep," she said. "And I'm not wrong." I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't move. Listening was doing more work than speaking ever could. "We're struggling," Tara continued. "We're counting every dollar, and he's sitting on money he'll never use. He doesn't even travel. He barely buys anything." Another pause. Then Evan sighed. "He helped us a lot over the years." "A lot?" Tara scoffed. "He helped when it was convenient. Remember when we asked about refinancing the car?" He hesitated, like we were asking for charity. I closed my eyes. That car payment had come 3 days after I'd wired them $2,000 for daycare. I remembered sitting at my desk, calculator out, checking my balance twice before sending it anyway. "He's selfish," Tara said flatly. "He just hides it under this calm old man act." Evan didn't respond right away. That silence told me more than words would have. Then he said, "Maybe. He could have done more." Something cold settled in my chest, not anger. Clarity. Tara kept going. "That money should be ours, at least most of it. We're the ones raising kids. He's already lived his life." I stared at the ceiling fan, watching it cut slow circles in the dark. "How would we even get him to agree?" Evan asked. Tara's voice softened, but it wasn't kindness. It was strategy. "You don't confront him. You guide him, make him feel guilty, remind him of the kids, of your mom." I felt that one land. "And if that doesn't work?" Evan asked. There was a brief sound above me, fabric shifting, maybe the bed. Then Tara said it. "Then we escalate." My hands curled into the sheets. "Escalate how?" Evan asked. "Legally," she replied. "People his age get confused. No one would question it. You've seen how stubborn he can be." I sat up slowly, careful not to make a sound. "You're talking about his mental state," Evan said. "I'm talking about protecting our family," Tara answered. "Judges see this all the time. Undue influence, capacity concerns. It doesn't have to be dramatic." Evan exhaled. "That feels extreme." $14 million is extreme," she said, "for someone who will probably be gone in 10 years anyway." That was when something shifted completely. Not because of the number, not even because of the cruelty, because she said it like a scheduling detail. 10 years. That's what my life was worth to her. A timeline inconvenience. I didn't feel shaky. I didn't feel panicked. I felt organized. The conversation upstairs faded into murmurs after that, the kind couples use when they think decisions are already made. I lay back down and waited for the house to settle again, waited for the silence to return. When it did, I reached over and picked up my phone. No messages, no missed calls. I opened the Notes app instead. I typed a date at the top. Then I typed one word underneath it: inventory. I wasn't angry. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was taking stock. By the time the light under their door went out upstairs, I had made a short list: bank accounts, medical records, past transfers, written agreements, things I already had, things I'd kept without realizing why. I put the phone face down again and lay there until morning. At 6:12 a.m. I got out of bed, showered, and dressed like it was a normal weekday. The mirror showed the same man it always had. Maybe a little more tired, maybe a little more awake. Downstairs, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table while the sun came up. I didn't confront them, I didn't rehearse speeches, I just waited. Because once you know someone is willing to erase you to get what they want, the only smart move is to stop reacting and start preparing. And that morning, for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I was doing next. They came down just after 8. Evan first, rubbing his eyes, trying to look normal. Tara a moment later, already dressed, already composed. She smiled when she saw me at the table, like the night before hadn't happened. "Morning," she said lightly. "Morning," I replied. I didn't mention what I'd heard. I poured another cup of coffee and slid the cream across the table when Evan sat down. Routine has a way of keeping people comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes. The kids came down soon after, loud and hungry. Breakfast was cereal and toast, nothing special. Tara checked her phone between bites. Evan watched me more than he watched his food. After they packed up to leave, Tara hugged me longer than necessary. "We'll talk soon," she said quietly, close to my ear. Not a question, a reminder. "I'm sure we will," I said. When their car pulled out of the driveway, the house felt larger, quieter, like it had exhaled. I didn't sit down right away. I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out the briefcase again, set it on the desk, opened it carefully. Then I took out another box from the shelf above, old folders labeled in my handwriting, dates, amounts, notes I'd written years ago and barely thought about since. I hadn't planned to need them. I'd just never been the kind of man who threw things away. I sat down and made coffee again, this time bringing the mug into my home office. The room still smelled faintly of printer ink and dust. I turned on the desk lamp, even though it was daylight. Then I started organizing. I didn't think in feelings, I thought in steps. Step 1, verify reality. Bank statements. Every transfer I'd ever made to Evan or Tara. Most of them marked loan in the memo line. Not because I'd been strict, but because my accountant once told me it mattered. Step 2, establish capacity, medical records, annual checkups, cognitive screenings tied to my insurance renewals, clean, consistent, documented. Step 3, protect access. I logged into my accounts and changed passwords, enabled additional verification, moved funds I didn't need immediately into accounts that required my physical presence to access. It took most of the morning. I didn't rush. Rushing creates errors. Around noon, my phone rang. Evan. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey, Dad," he said. His voice was careful. "Tara's been thinking about options." "I'm sure she has," I replied. There was a pause. "She found an attorney who specializes in elder planning. Just informational." "I already have representation," I said. That caught him off guard. "You do?" "Yes." Another pause. I could almost hear Tara in the background, mouthing questions. "Dad," Evan said, "this doesn't need to get complicated." "It already is," I answered calmly. That evening, I drove downtown to a small office building I'd visited only once before. The sign on the door read, Harris & Cole, Legal Services, Clean, Unflashy, Efficient. Dana Harris met me exactly on time. Gray hair, clear eyes, no wasted words. "You believe family members may attempt to challenge your financial autonomy," she said after reviewing my documents. "Not a question." "Yes. And you have reason to believe this challenge would involve misrepresentation." "Yes." She nodded once. "Then we document everything and move faster than they expect." She didn't sound angry. She sounded prepared. We created a timeline, deposits, communications, notes from calls I'd logged without thinking much of it at the time. "You've been methodical," she said, sliding the folder closed. "That makes this simple." Simple wasn't the same as easy, but I understood what she meant. When I got home that night, there was a message waiting on my phone from an unfamiliar number. "We're worried about you. Please call us back so we can make sure you're okay." No signature, no warmth, just concern, carefully worded. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed one more set of documents and placed them in the briefcase. Then I locked it in the filing cabinet and turned the key. I stood in the kitchen afterward, rinsing my mug, watching the water spiral down the drain. Silence isn't absence, it's leverage. And by the end of that day, I had plenty of it. I went to bed early, knowing the next move wouldn't be mine, but I was ready for it when it came. The envelope arrived 3 days later. Plain, official. My name typed cleanly across the front. No return address that meant anything to me. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, set it on the counter, sat down at the table. Only then did I slide a finger under the flap. The document inside was neat, confident, and very wrong. A petition requesting a formal review of my financial decision-making capacity, filed by Evan, co-signed by Tara. I read it once, then again, slowly. Claims of confusion, poor judgment, emotional vulnerability, statements from concerned acquaintances, a reference to a medical opinion I had never given and an appointment I had never attended. I folded the papers carefully and placed them back in the envelope. Then I called Dana. "Good," she said after I finished reading. "They moved exactly when we expected." That afternoon, I completed an independent cognitive evaluation, comprehensive, documented. Thorough enough that the examiner paused halfway through and asked what I did for a living before retirement. "Engineering," I said. "That tracks," he replied. By evening, the counter report was already drafted. The confrontation itself didn't happen in court. It happened in my living room. Evan called that night, voice tight. "We need to talk, in person." "I agree," I said. "Tomorrow, 4 o'clock." They arrived early. Tara stood straighter than usual. Evan looked like he hadn't slept. I didn't invite them to sit. I placed 3 folders on the coffee table instead. "This is my evaluation," I said. "Independent, current, legally sufficient." I slid the second folder forward. "This is the record of every financial transfer I've made to you over the last 18 years. Dates, amounts, purpose." Tara's mouth tightened. The third folder stayed in my hands. "And this," I said, "is the documentation showing the medical statement you submitted was falsified." Evan looked at Tara. She didn't look back. "You accused me of being incompetent," I continued. "You attempted to restrict my access to my own accounts. You involved third parties based on information you knew was untrue." Tara finally spoke. "We were protecting the family." "No," I said calmly. "You were protecting an outcome." Evan's voice cracked. "Dad, we didn't think it would go this far." "It went exactly as far as you pushed it," I replied. I stood, not to intimidate, just to reset the room. "The petition will be withdrawn," I said, "immediately. Any further attempt to challenge my autonomy will be met formally." Tara stood as well. "You're choosing money over your son." I shook my head once. "I'm choosing boundaries over manipulation." Silence filled the space. Evan sat back down. His hands trembled slightly. "What happens now?" "That depends," I said, "on whether this stops here." They left without another word. That night, I filed one final document with Dana's office. Not punitive, protective. When I turned off the lights and went upstairs, I felt tired, but steady. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was realizing how long they'd assumed I wouldn't notice. The withdrawal notice was filed 48 hours later. Dana forwarded it to me with a single line in the email. "Petition dismissed in full. No findings, no restrictions." I read it once, then archived it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it was finished. The next development came from somewhere I hadn't expected. Evan showed up alone the following Saturday morning. No call ahead, no warning, just his car in the driveway and a hesitant knock at the door. When I opened it, he looked smaller somehow. Like the version of him that used to sit at my kitchen table doing homework, not quite sure if the answer was right. "I didn't tell her I was coming," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. He stood in the living room, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the shelves. "She's furious," he added, "but things aren't lining up for me anymore." I waited. Silence does better work than questions. "She had documents ready," he said, "before we even talked to you. Timelines, statements. She knew exactly what to say to make it sound reasonable. I nodded once. Evan swallowed. I signed things I didn't fully read. I told myself it was temporary, that we were just leveling the field. That's how most lines get crossed, I said. He exhaled, long and slow. I'm not asking for the money, he said quickly. I know that's over. I know, I replied. I just needed to say this face to face, he continued. What I did, wasn't about need. It was entitlement, and I let it happen because it was easier than pushing back. That was the closest he'd ever come to naming the truth. I walked to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of him. There are consequences, I said, sitting across from him. Not as punishment, as structure. He nodded. I figured. I won't fund your household anymore, I continued. No emergency transfers, no quiet help. That pattern is over. He didn't argue. But, I added, the documented loans remain loans. If you want to repay them gradually, we can formalize a schedule. Clear terms, no ambiguity. Evan looked relieved in a way that surprised me. Rules, he said quietly. I think I need that. I slid a single page across the table. Not a contract, just a summary. He read it carefully. This time, all the way through. I can do this, he said. I believed him, not because he was my son, but because he'd finally stopped asking me to save him. Tara didn't contact me again. Through Dana, I learned she'd consulted 2 attorneys. Both declined to proceed further. The false medical statement had closed that door permanently. A week later, Dana confirmed something else. The funds that had been temporarily restricted were fully restored. No flags, no notes, clean. The system had corrected itself. On a quiet Tuesday morning, I reorganized my home office, shredded old papers, labeled new folders, moved the briefcase to the bottom drawer where it belonged. Order has a calming effect when it's earned. That afternoon, I took a walk through the neighborhood. Same sidewalks, same trees. A few neighbors waved. Some avoided eye contact. That was fine. I didn't need consensus. I needed clarity. At home, I made soup and ate it at the counter, standing. The house felt like mine again, not because it was empty, but because it was honest. That night, Evan sent a short text. Thank you for not pretending this didn't happen. I put the phone face down, then I turned off the lights and went to bed, knowing the hardest part was no longer ahead of me, but behind. The house settled back into its usual rhythm after that. Mornings returned to coffee, the paper, and the sound of the radiator clicking when it felt like it. I reorganized the pantry 1 shelf at a time, throwing out expired cans I'd been meaning to deal with for years. Small, ordinary tasks, the kind that don't ask for explanations. Evan came by once a week after that, always alone. We didn't talk much at first. Sometimes we worked on things instead, fixing a loose hinge, clearing the gutter by the garage. Quiet work has a way of rebuilding trust without forcing it. When we did talk, it stayed practical. He set up automatic payments for the loan schedule. No reminders needed, no excuses offered, just steady follow-through. I didn't praise him for it. Consistency doesn't need applause. Tara never returned. From what Evan told me, sparingly, without drama, she moved in with a friend for a while, then started making calls, trying to reframe the story, trying to regain control of it. It didn't work the way it used to. Once credibility breaks, it doesn't shatter loudly. It just stops holding weight. One afternoon, I found myself back in the garage, opening a box I hadn't touched since Lynn died. Old notebooks, manuals, a few folded papers she'd saved for reasons I never asked about. At the bottom was a small envelope with my name in her handwriting. Inside was a single note. You're allowed to stop giving when it turns into permission to be used. I stood there longer than I expected, holding it. Not sad, not angry, just aware. That night I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, the same place where so many quiet decisions had been made without anyone noticing. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished, with something that had run its course. A few days later, I got a call from an old colleague, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. He'd heard indirectly that I'd handled a family situation involving finances. He paused before asking, "Do you ever notice how people assume older men won't push back?" I did notice. And I also noticed how often those assumptions lead to unnecessary damage because no one sets the line early enough. That thought stayed with me, not as anger, as awareness. I still walk the same neighborhood, still shop at the same store, still drink the same coffee. The difference is internal, clearer rules, fewer explanations, more quiet. Respect doesn't come from generosity alone. It comes from boundaries that don't move when tested. If you found this story meaningful, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this space reach others who may need it. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Drop that in the comments. I read more of them than you might expect. 2 more popular stories will be waiting for you on the screen next, whenever you're ready. Thank you for spending this time with me.